Hi, everybody, and welcome back. Some of you are here live, and some of you will be watching this on our YouTube channel. But we're back again on another conversation with Dr. Nupur Agarwal on the power of gratitude this time. And thank you, Nupur, for doing this.
Yeah, thank you, Rishi. It's always a pleasure and lovely to have some people joining us live. But I'm sure a lot of you will be also watching it as a recording. So hopefully, we'll have a very interesting conversation on gratitude and cover some aspects which are perhaps overlooked. So, looking forward to an interesting hour of gratitude.
And also, I'm just going to paste the link of the YouTube channel for you to take a look at the other recordings that we've done, other conversations that we've had in case you are here for the first time. And I'm also going to send you the link to join our WhatsApp group, which is actually a way for us to quickly send people updates. So here's the WhatsApp link. Give me a second on the chat. I had to set this up on admin mode. I was hoping that we could keep it for questions, but I think people just are so immature and they just post any kind of crap on the group. Recently, we had some stuff we could not even delete from the group, so we put it in admin mode. So it's safe to join this group in the sense there'll be one way though. And we get to let you know when the next conversation is happening. Plus, if there are any workshops that Nupur is going to be doing, we'll post it on that WhatsApp group. And let's get started. And we'll open it up for questions at the end. If you feel like there's a question that comes to you right now, you can just text it in the chat and we will respond to it when Nupur is completed saying what she wants to talk about, power of gratitude. So let's get started. Nupur, I've got a few questions here which I've just written down. Yeah, I want to know when and how did you first realize the power of gratitude? Is it something new? Is it something that you've known for a while?
I think we all grow up listening to the fact that you have to say thank you and you have to be well mannered, and that's what kind of was my practice of gratitude. Didn't even think of it as gratitude. It was a very normal social interactive way of saying thanks when you would get something, or just a casual social interactive gesture, really. Till I started working as a clinician, and I worked a lot for oral cancer. And I started noticing with the same kind of diagnosis, with the same kind of prognosis, which is what we predict probably is going to be a recovery for a patient and how long the illness will last and how much they will recover from. I noticed that patients who were pretty similar in both these aspects of their diagnosis and the severity of their condition and the prognosis were responding very differently to the same treatment that was being given to them. And though there are many factors which contribute to that for a patient's recovery, but one of the key things that I started noticing was a person's attitude that was impacting their speed of recovery as well as the extent of their recovery. And that was gratitude, one of the attitudes of gratitude, which was so powerful. And this kept happening, in my clinical experience. And I noticed that people who were generally more predisposed to feeling grateful for the treatment they were receiving, for the life support they had in terms of their family, or for the fact that, yes, there is a part of the body that has cancer, but there is rest of the body that is still healthy and is supporting their life, right? So when all of this was happening, I could see a marked difference in their recovery. And that really got me thinking that something is special about them. Something is special about the way they're perceiving their life and their challenge, the health challenge. And from then on, I have a research mindset. I do research a lot. And the areas that interest me, gratitude started to become one of the key areas. And I started researching on gratitude. And I realized that it is way more powerful than just a thank you that we are so conditioned to speak even without feeling sometimes, almost a robotic response. But yes, gratitude has some gravity to it. It has some power to it. And that's what led me into this practice.
Wow, cool. So,
And Shiva,
so
what
actually,
about you? What brought you into this space of gratitude?
so
Anything that,
I
yeah.
think I had a good experience. I first when I started with you and Ashish on these various sessions that you were doing, it was on gratitude. Now, I have heard about gratitude from other workshops. Almost all healing or alternative healing workshops, gratitude is a plug. Even in the law of attraction programs, gratitude was one of the things that I've spoken about. What I just want to say about what I got from the workshop that I attended with you and Ashish was something I could share with other people. In other places where people usually end up like, "Thank you, bolu to yaar, kitna bolu?" How much do I think I've made a list. They say maintain a gratitude list. Make a list of things you're grateful for. And people run out of things to be grateful for. And so whenever I hear that, I said, okay, here's my chance to share with them what I learned from you guys at the workshop. And when I started sharing with them, one of the things I remember, I think it was you or Ashish, I'm not too sure who mentioned it, but can we, for a moment, go back and just realize that, apart from the basics, like I'm grateful that I can see, I can grateful that I can smell, I'm grateful that I have parents that took care of me, are taking care of me, or whatever. But just imagine if you just go take the parents aspect, right? And you expand that into like I think most people by the time they start earning their first salary or start earning money, it's post 22, 24 years old. Like till then they kind of dependent on mom and dad to help them, house them, feed them, all of that stuff. So I said, if you think just the number of days, 365 days in a year into 24 years, somebody else took that responsibility. How many of us don't have that, thing? And it's not just parents now, it's parents expanded into every day you were taken care of. Food ka kami nahi, shelter ka kami nahi, education you were given, exposure to lots of things. And suddenly they realize, oh shit, actually, this list that I'm making can just go on for pages now. So that was one of the things. I always bring these examples that I learned at your workshop to other places. And then they realize there's actually an infinite amount of things they can be grateful for. That was something that was one of the strong things that I took back from that gratitude
Mm.
workshop of yours.
I'm so glad, and you remember it. It's been a few years now, and
Yeah.
and that's what actually you're absolutely right that we realize the power of gratitude and how understated and undervalued it is that we actually created and curated a whole workshop on that. And that is one of the workshops that we do at Mindful Living, but we also do it for corporates, because what we notice is that in our culture of competence and competition and, the race against time to build profits, and especially in our financial industry, and not just there, everywhere, we have forgotten certain key forces that are driving our human behaviors and human interactions.
Yeah.
And gratitude is one of them. So that's the reason why that workshop that you attended that was the purpose of that. And I'm so happy to hear that you remember something from that and you're practicing that clearly.
Yeah. In fact,
Wonderful.
even if it's just like sometimes we get business and the transaction value could be very small. It could be just like 1,600 rupees or 1,200 rupees or 512 rupees or some small transaction. And we are like looking, where's the 20 grand? Where's the 50 grand number? Yeah? Why isn't that all? But I think it's important to even if that 1,200 rupees comes, like, I got 1,200 rupees. Sometimes it's as small as 111 or something like that. There's some program where I'm seeing 111 is coming. But I think one should be grateful, no matter how small or big the number is, it has the same potential energy. One should be able to go into that state of being grateful for any amount that comes because it's come. Be grateful
Exactly,
that it's come.
exactly. Absolutely. You're so right. And we will talk about that definitely more today.
So,
But thank you for sharing that, Rishi.
right.
Thank you.
Okay, I have a question. Is can you expand a little bit more on if gratitude? People might be thinking that it's just about saying thank you, but and many of us do. But can you expand more on that, and can you talk about the science behind this, if at all?
Yeah, absolutely. So, thank you is a word that we relate to gratitude most closely. And as I said, it is a part of our practice that we say it very casually, sometimes meaning it, sometimes just out of practice. But it's a social etiquette. It's a part of our social etiquette, which is amazing to have. Gratitude is slightly deeper than that. In fact, I would say it's much more deeper and profound than the practice of just saying thank you. Gratitude, as I said, is almost an attitude with which we can choose to live our life. It's a mindset. It's a mindset. So it's not just a few words, but it's actually a mindset that we start. The more we start to become aware of, the more we integrate it in our life, in our behaviors, in the way we perceive life. Because that's what we have been seeing. And I've been seeing that in my work, even as a clinician, as I shared my example of the patients who actually taught me gratitude. So I'm very grateful to them for that. But also as somebody who works in the mind-body medicine space, I can see that, the more we are practicing this energy, which I call the vibration of gratitude, the more we are noticing shifts are happening. And these are, I would say it's a more profound energetic, it's a vibration, it's a frequency of gratitude. It's almost like, when we log into our radios and we type in a particular FM channel, suppose we're, wanting 102.8 FM. But the simultaneously other frequencies are also existing. 96.4 is also there, but we are only tuning and we are listening to something which is at that frequency of 102.8. Now, that's exactly what gratitude does. So gratitude is actually shifting our energy. That doesn't mean that other things in our life don't exist, our challenges don't exist, but because we are now vibrating at a higher frequency where we are able to perceive differently. We're able to shift our attention from being more problem focused to being more solution focused, right? So gratitude is actually way beyond just the mechanical act of saying thank you. It's an attitude, it's a mindset, and it has energy and vibration to it. In fact, if I can quickly share something which I found very interesting, I think.
Yeah, you can just share your screen. Yeah,
yeah, I'm not sure if I can, but let's see.
should be able to. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine.
Let me stop sharing.
Yeah, maybe you'll need to just stop the sound sharing, and let's see if I can then share something.
Yeah, try that now.
Yeah. So yeah, this was a very interesting slide that I came across. So, a cartoon. I hope you can see that.
Yes.
It just kind of goes to show that our default mode as humans is to be, queuing up with complaints and grudges, and there's a window. It's almost like empty where people are not queuing up to express gratitude. So this was something, visuals are always very, reflective. So that's what I thought I'll share with our participants today. And just be mindful that, where we are going in our life. What is our default mode, so to say? Are we more complaint focused? Or can we shift our perspective and kind of shift the queue and start queuing up in the line of gratitude? Because that's where shifts happen. And you asked me about the science of gratitude.
Yes.
Rishi, amazing that certain things in life which are most powerful are most underrated, and gratitude is one of them. Because gratitude is actually showing us now through fMRI studies and through a lot of research that's gone into that it's actually rewiring our brain cells. It's rewiring our neural networks. Now we know a phenomenon called neuroplasticity. And that means that our brains are not static. Our brains and our neural structures are constantly changing to adapt to our external situations and stimulus, right? So that means it's a huge thing to know that we can alter our brains, we can alter the neural pathways. And gratitude is proving to be one of the key most things that's changing our neural pathways to a more positive mindset, to creating more joy and happiness for people. And this is important because the contrary is to be in a stress response or a fear response, which actually shuts down our health. It shuts down our immune system. Our immune system, and we have been talking a lot, we know through COVID, immune system was talked about greatly. So the stress which we talk about, the stress response creates a shutdown of our immune system. It creates inflammation in the body that creates further conditions like cardiovascular events like strokes or hypertension, or cardiovascular conditions like cardiac arrest or heart failure. Now, these are all conditions that we understand somewhere happen because of stress. When stress happens, we have certain chemicals that are released in the body, like cortisol, which is infamous for creating these conditions. Now, what the scientists have discovered is, similarly, we have gratitude as a practice that can counter a lot of these side effects of cortisol and stress responses in the body. Gratitude is actually triggering certain neurotransmitters like serotonin. It is creating, even impacting the production of oxytocin, which is the love and feel good hormone. And all these hormones and all these neurochemicals impact the way we function. It creates impact on our joy, on our health, on our healing. So it's literally triggering that part of our brain's nervous system, which is called the autonomic nervous system, which has a branch called parasympathetic nervous system. So gratitude as a practice is triggering this parasympathetic nervous system that is triggering health and healing and recovery, right? Gratitude has a direct impact on certain key brain areas, right? It is definitely immunomodulating, that means helping our immune system, but it is also changing the way we are perceiving and reframing our challenges. So for people with trauma, people who have had intense trauma in their life, like we call something called post-traumatic stress disorders, PTSD. And these are people who have had traumas, and this could be trauma, could be anything. It doesn't only have to be somebody what a war veteran is going through, but it could be a child who was abused or humiliated, right? It could be trauma for that child. So when we practice gratitude, we change or reframe the context of that event. The event is still the same, but the way we perceive it changes through gratitude practices. And that is because gratitude practices are impacting a center of our brain. It is called the prefrontal cortex, that is responsible for the context creation of humans. So we have to also understand that our brain is very, very largely responsible for our social perceptions and our beliefs and our feelings of wellness. And gratitude as a practice is now proving there is so much science and research. So please go and understand and practice this. And research for yourself, because this is what we do in our workshop. So the workshop that we conducted was, believe it or not, supposed to be a 2-part workshop, Rishi. But when I started researching it and I realized there's so much to it that it became a 4-part workshop because gratitude really is life-changing. And if you talk about, as you mentioned, law of attraction, and when we listen to some stories like, Oprah Winfrey is a very common name. Tony Robinson, he's a coach, and these people have really built their empires from nothing. So, they all talk about the power of gratitude, right? So there is power in gratitude through a vibrational and a spiritual aspect, but also now from a scientific and a research aspect. So it is definitely a very powerful thing.
Okay, for those who are already have a spiritual bent, will probably lap up whatever you just said. I'm not sure if you have access to information ready, but maybe for the viewers who are watching the YouTube video, would you be able to send me also any case studies or scientific studies?
Absolutely. We'll definitely put
we
them.
can paste them below
yes.
this video in the description.
Absolutely. We'll be very happy to
Fabulous. Do that. Great. What is gratitude gap? I was reading about it, but I didn't quite understand that. Can you just talk a little bit about what is this thing called gratitude gap?
Gratitude gap is almost, it's a very interesting phenomenon, and that's why the term was coined. It talks about the reluctance of practicing gratitude because of undervaluing the power of it. It's almost like when people feel that what's the big deal in feeling gratitude? It's not really going to shake mountains for me. It's not going to create a huge shift. A lot of times people come from the mindset that they feel that being grateful is being soft. It's not a manly thing to do. It's not a thing of machoism to be grateful. And we notice that in a lot of companies as well. People don't have they have a very cut and dry culture, because if you express gratitude and if you are perceived as being soft and you're perceived as being somebody who is very, so that these were older perceptions that have come. And that's why people talked about the gratitude gap. Also, a lot of times in my research, what was very interesting to notice was that I noticed that there was a sense of entitlement in people. People feel that they're entitled to certain things in life. People feel that, oh, I deserve this. I'm entitled to this. And when you have that sense of entitlement, or a sense that, oh, of course I deserve it, that time you diminish the sense of gratitude, because you become very, very egotistical, very ego driven, right? And this sense of entitlement brings us into that space which is a space where there is no gratitude, or there is a complete lack of it, right? So these are the kind of behaviors that one needs to be very wary of. What you talked about was recognizing that, human species is one of the most helpless species when they're born. Like if you look at a calf or a dog or a cat, within hours, the child is licked, the calf is licked by the cow or the kitten or the little puppy. And they are made to stand up on their feet. And the moment they're standing up on their feet, they're almost self-sufficient. They feed for a little while, but then they're self-sufficient. They can literally go off in the wild. But human species is one of the few animals, if I can say, which is so dependent on their caregivers, on their nurturers, that, we literally can be sucking the blood from them for 18, 22 years and probably even longer. So, we have to understand that the sense of entitlement that we have is something to be very watchful of, because that's what's taking away this gratitude and gratefulness, because you almost feel that this is meant to be for me and I deserve it. So that's one thing I would say, be very mindful of gratitude gap there.
Great. Awesome. All right. Another point is when people are, in grief, or there's some crisis or something like that. It's difficult. Can you talk about how do people become grateful at that time when they're already experiencing a lot of grief?
Yeah. So I would like to say that we never repair our roof when when there's a storm.
Right.
When it's like really pouring and everything is leaking. We need to do it beforehand, and we need to have a robust roof, right? We need to prepare for war before the war strikes. Otherwise, it's a lost cause. So similarly with gratitude, the more we adopt the attitude of gratitude, the more resilient we become. And in fact, a lot of research is coming up with the fact that the gratitude practices are increasing resilience, not just in behavior, but also in terms of performance. Like for people who have had cardiac surgeries, for example, the resilience there is also increasing. Their cardiac functioning is improving. Their arteries and their vessels are becoming more resilient, and they're functioning better. So gratitude is creating things, but we need to adopt it before the crisis strikes. But as we know that life happens all the time, right? And if you are going through a stage of crisis, how gratitude can change is, it's not diminishing the grief. Suppose somebody has lost somebody, we are not saying you have to be practicing gratitude to overcome the grief. In fact, the practice of gratitude shifts the gear to feeling fully whatever we are feeling, and that's really important, but not getting submerged in it, right? But at coming to a point where you allow yourself to see the purpose of that there is always a purpose to our challenges are coming in our life for a reason, for a purpose, and seeing seeing whatever you can, as I said, the silver lining in the situation, right? Because it's a funny thing, Rishi, our energy flows where our attention goes, and that's a law. It's almost like the third law of Newton, that to every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. right? So with gratitude also, we notice that the more gratitude we give, it will bounce back and it will give us back equally and sometimes even more pronounced. That's why it is used in law of attraction a lot to change our vibration. In terms of crisis and grief, I want to share something very profound, which was given to us by Dr. David R. Hawkins. He was one of the early researchers. And I would like to share this diagram for our viewers to have a look. Now, this is something which is called the emotional guidance scale, right? Now, think of it from the level, lowest level of shame, guilt, apathy, grief, sadness. Now, typically when crisis is striking us, or when there is a sense of loss, we are typically at these low levels of emotions, right? So this is called the emotional guidance scale, which was given to us, as I said, by Dr. David R. Hawkins. And if you want to know more about this, you can read the book, Power versus Force. It's a very, very useful resource. Now, what he mapped out was that through kinesiology, that most of our human emotions have this scale. So like a point of 20, 30, and it's almost, if you correlate it to this funnel, that we can see that there is suffering, there is a sense of contraction. And the higher in emotional scale that we go, we are feeling more expanded. We are in more flow. We are able to take more elevated action. We are getting into the space of courage, pride. We're getting more neutral. So you can see that the emotional score is also going up. So these sad emotions and difficult emotions are at a very lower vibrational scale. And then we can go up the scale. Now, where does gratitude come into this picture? Gratitude is believed to be the biggest shifter and the pattern interrupt. It breaks the patterns. It elevates our vibration from a particular scale and helps us to elevate into the next scale. Almost think of gratitude as an elevator that is raising your vibration and it's taking you from a lower scale to a higher. Right? Mm-hmm. That's the power of gratitude in crisis, right? But that has to be something, as I talked about, that gratitude is creating shifts at our neural network, neural pathways. And there's a saying that neurons that wire together fire together. And for anything to happen, the neurons need to fire together. So when we are practicing gratitude, it is changing our neural pathways, it is changing our neurochemistry, the chemicals, and it is changing the way the brain and heart are connected. And it changes our heart rate, it changes our physiological responses. And it also changes our perception of our situation. So it brings us into a more neutral space, or perhaps an energy of trust, acceptance, and slowly. So it is one of the biggest elevators of our energetic vibration. And that's how we can get over any of these states that we are experiencing.
Quick question that came in. What was the name of the book again? You said of this doctor.
Yes, so the book is called Power versus Force.
Power versus Force, okay.
Power versus Force, and it is by Dr. David Hawkins.
Yeah. Okay, fine. I just got that. I'm just going to push it on the link below. All right, great. I have one more question. Any practices you can recommend for our audience, whether they're watching it later on YouTube or right now, to enhance their gratitude quotient, if I would call it that?
Yes, and I love the word gratitude quotient. So, thank you for saying that aloud. We have something which we know is the emotional quotient, and we have this fascination for IQ, that is intelligence quotient. And I would really encourage our viewers to start to now develop their gratitude quotient, or the GQ, which is, again, something the more we develop, the more will, like the third law of Newton, give us back. The practices, Rishi, are simple, yet profound. I will start with certain basic practices, but I will go on to something that is now research validated. And I'll talk about certain practices which the research is telling us is creating bigger impact. For the longest time, we have been told to journal. So creating a gratitude journal is definitely something that is a very, very elevated practice, because it starts to shift our focus. And the moment we start to shift our focus to something which is more positive, something more productive, we tend to be less ruminative. And what does rumination mean? To be dwelling on our sadness, on our problems, and on the negativities, so to speak. So creating a habit of a gratitude journal creating a habit of gratitude, perhaps even as a gratitude stone. When you can pick up something which is something of an object, it creates an anchor. Now, anchoring again is something of a neuro-linguistic programming or NLP technique, where we associate certain sensations with a behavioral or an emotional response. So you can pick up a beautiful stone or any stone when you're going for your walk tomorrow morning, and call it your gratitude stone, and you hold it in your hand and you say 5 things that you're grateful for, right? And when you are saying something like gratitude, don't just say something, okay, I'm grateful for my eyes. A very interesting practice is to say, why are you grateful for your eyes? So not just what you're grateful for, but why you're grateful for. Because the why is what's going to take you deeper into the practice of gratitude, right? So if that makes sense. So why you're grateful for that. Also, something which I do a lot with my younger clients, especially with teenagers and younger, in fact, even younger than that, maybe 10-year-olds. And of course, age is not there because they're so open. And the more, the more grown up we are, the more resistant we are. So this practice works beautifully with children, but it also works really well with adults. It's called having a gratitude jar. For those of us who can't write things down and don't like writing journals, have a jar at home and just start putting things in, random things that you feel today. You've had something very grateful for today. What happened? Something that you are genuinely very grateful for. And it could be a small thing, but just write it down and put it in the jar. Towards the end of the year, you can just open that jar and you'll have so many beautiful things that, you would actually can reminisce about that you were so grateful for. Another practice is that was traditionally practiced, as at dinner time, families would get together and would say something which is around a prayer of, saying thank you, thank you to the food, thank you to what brought this food on the table, and thank you for being together, that to be in a state to be able to eat, but not all of us have the luxury to eat and chew and swallow and get the food benefits, So thanks to at the dinner table. A lot of times these days, especially, families are doing that again, because people have such little time, people are working, children are studying, and they have video games that are distracting them. So there's only meal time that we can decide to come together. And before that practice, we can just say a few gratitude statements that bring us into that vibration. Gratitude letters is something I really, really recommend. Writing a letter of gratitude to somebody you feel very deeply for, and expressing why you're grateful for, expressing the fact that they're so valuable to you in your life. And this could start with somebody you really love and somebody in your family, and it could go on to your colleagues. In fact, gratitude letter writing is something we do in corporate workshops, where we ask people to write a letter to their teammates, and even to write it for those people who they're not so pally with, or those kind of teammates that are kind of rubbing them the wrong way. Because the moment you start writing a letter and you start thinking of good things about that person, it automatically shifts your relationship, and everything related to productivity gets enhanced, because the better we are as a team player, the better the quality of our work is, of course. So a gratitude letter is very powerful. Now, these are very simple practices, but they're very profound. However, research is telling us something very interesting, that the most powerful impact of gratitude practice that has on our mind and our brain and our neural pathways, which is now being studied in fMRI studies, is about thinking of a time when somebody said thank you to you, when somebody expressed gratitude to you. Apparently, accepting gratitude from somebody is supposed to spike our gratitude quotient a lot. So thinking of a time when you received appreciation. So appreciation is also a form of gratitude. So when somebody expressed their deep gratitude to you for impacting their life or impacting them in that moment, and the more you think of it, the more you're activating those centers in the brain which get triggered by gratitude. And they then release a cascade of neural and biochemical pathways in the body. And this is what researchers are telling us. So think of something, and this could be as little as doing it for just 5 minutes a day. And repetition is the key. So we are now, because we want evidence for everything, that's how we have become. And now we have evidence that gratitude is impacting our health, it's impacting our emotions and our well-being. So even 5 minutes of practice done 3 to 5 times a week has got very powerful effects on our body, and our happiness quotient is improving, right? So think of a time when somebody said thank you to you. What did you do? What did they feel about you? And be in that vibration just for 5 minutes. Now, if this is something which and repeat the same thing again and again. And the second way of doing the same practice is storytelling. Now, stories is something which have a deep impact on human beings. We have specific centers in our brain which get activated by storytelling. That's why children learn so much through storytelling. And the more the more we grow up, the more adult we are, we diminish the value of storytelling. But now research is telling us listening to motivational stories or listening to powerful stories that make us feel good. So suppose you're listening to somebody's story and you realize, especially of somebody who has gone through a genocide or somebody who survived a crisis, and they're narrating their story to, it could be on YouTube or on other platforms, and they're telling us about the way they battled and the help they got and how against all odds they survived. And they're not just surviving, they're thriving, right? The more you hear these motivational stories, the more our gratitude centers get activated. Because somewhere we as humans relate to the experience of other humans very deeply at the empathy level, at the compassion level. And that is triggering a great space. It's almost like, Rishi, you may have experienced that you heard something and you felt so triggered, you felt so warm, you felt so fuzzy, and you felt so good about it. So that is what the story is doing to us, right? So listening to motivational stories, like I can share the story of this gentleman called Nick Wojcik.
Yes.
He's an Australian gentleman, and we talk about his story even in our workshop.
Wow, yes.
This guy was born without limbs. He doesn't have hands and he doesn't have legs. He's completely without limbs. And this man went through, imagine being without limbs. And I really urge people to YouTube Nick Wojcik's story and listen to his journey, how he almost was suicidal. He didn't see a purpose to his life, and how he changed his perceptions, how he overcame the mind blocks, because the body cannot be changed, but the mind can. So the mindset can be changed, and how he worked on that, how he used gratitude as a tool and other tools to now become a motivational teacher. And he is going around the world giving talks, motivating people, and he's not just surviving, he's thriving, and he's motivating other people to live. Now, these stories are what are creating huge shifts for us. And that's what the research in gratitude is telling us. Listen to these stories repeatedly. And in fact, you can even, when you're listening to something, you can even write down a few bullet points or make out some notes that what is it about this story that inspires you? How does it impact you? How is it motivating you? If this person can do it, so can I. There is, again, a documentary which I find very inspirational, and I do quote it in a lot of my work, my workshops, my webinars. It's 14 Peaks. It's on Netflix.
Yes.
It talks about this gentleman from Nepal who has scaled, 14 peaks in record time. Now, when you listen to these kind of stories, this is what starts to create shifts and profound shifts. In fact, there was a research that was done, and I got to know it from neuroscientist called Mr. Andrew Huberman. He has a podcast, and he talks about that in his work. And he talks about there was a study done where the same story was narrated to different people at different times. So that means there's a story, and you will be made to listen to it, not at the same time. Somebody was in the research facility, somebody was given that story, but they had heart rate monitors. And every person who listened to that story had the same heart rate variability or the same intervals in their heart rate. And that was almost surprising, because imagine people are listening to it at different times, different intervals, but they had the same effect on their heart rate, graph. And that's what the researchers then told us, deciphered from the study, that stories have a deep impact. and they're creating shifts at the level of our heart. Now, by the same logic, when you're listening to a motivational story, it is creating deep impacts in our heart rate. It's creating deep impacts in our breathing process, right? So this is what I think we all need to become smarter, because we have so much science, so much research coming up. We have no excuse. We are living in a world and a time where we have the best of tools and technology. So we must listen to these stories. We must get inspired by these researches that are coming out and understand that gratitude, is transformational. And I have seen that in my work as a clinician. I'm seeing that in my work as a mind-body medicine space, that, it is creating shifts for people in health and recovery and even finances. In fact, there is a Japanese businessman that he talks about hugely about how the power of gratitude has created and helped his business empire to grow. And, he talks about arigato is the word that they use in Japanese language. And maybe we can share some of his work as well as a link. I'll look up and I'll share that with everybody.
I have one question, because talking about these motivational videos, or like Nick Vujicic or whatever his name is. And I actually made a blog, which I've also shared on this group. For those of you that are watching it, you can see the link below of the video in the description. And I call them inspirational videos. And these are people like, just to give you some names, like the first one I've out here says 99 years old yoga teacher. And I'm like blown away. Stephen Hawking's voice and the machine, how he writes books, but he can't move, he can't do anything, he can't type. And if you read that, you watch that video, it's amazing. Fastest man on 2 hands. He just has 2 hands. He has no legs like Nick Vujicic, but he has hands. But 3-year-old child, trying a stunt with a skateboard, and he keeps trying till he gets it. Like just many of these stories that I put together. So I was like, there's this person who's very close to me. I don't want to mention his name, but he's going through a bad phase right now because he's physically challenged. He's going through a lot of pain and stuff like that. And I was like, hey, you know what? You're going through these set of problems. I normally go to these videos to help me, yeah. I said, so you've seen stuff like this? Yeah. I'm like, so doesn't this help? He says, no, not one bit. I'm suffering. I don't need to know what other people do. I'm suffering. I'm suffering. It doesn't motivate me at all. Where is that person actually? And I'm like, oh wow, that's interesting. I would have wanted to watch more such videos. Like, yeah, show me more. And let me go to YouTube and now search all videos that are going to motivate me and inspire me. So when a person gets to that level, are you familiar with that level of people where they're like, I'm looking at the video, they say, yeah, don't even show that to me. This is not going to motivate me. In fact, I'm getting more pissed off just you trying to show me. So can you tell me a little bit about what's happening with that person?
So it's, you have to understand, sometimes the suffering is so intense that an individual can get really, really paralyzed. The pain in the body and the pain and the discomfort in the body can really create a skewed perception of life and the life situations. And of course, that's a reality. And of course, that happens to a lot of people. And that is not to say that they are at fault here, Rishi, but it's about understanding compassionately that, of course, they are going through a huge challenge. And of course, they need, at this point in time, to only be allowed to experience what they wish to experience. And we don't need to force anything on them. And we have to also understand that we are creatures of habit, so and that's why it's so important to know these things early on in our life, because the more we can start changing and rewiring our brain patterns, the more resilient we become in times of crisis. And times of crisis, I just don't mean financial crisis, I'm also meaning health crisis, right? So we can't expect somebody who has gone through a lifetime without knowing any of these tools, any of the science, any of the power of these things, to all of a sudden wake up one day and be open to listening to these things. Because their neural pathways to a different way of perceiving life have become strengthened. So that's what they are doing. So it's something what we call the pain body concept. People kind of become so familiar with their suffering that they don't want to come out of it. But it's a comfort zone. They would rather be in that energy and stay in that space, right? Because that feels familiar to them. Now, for these people, what you can do is, you can perhaps write letters to them, and you can say that, how have you impacted my life? Why am I grateful to know you in my life? And when they read these letters, maybe they can start to feel a shift. So you can indirectly help them in that way, perhaps. But we can't, of course, there'll be people who'll be going through these situations, right? And that's the fact of life. But the more we can do anything, now we know that we just listening to how this person means to you or impacts your life in whichever way they have will make him feel good in some ways, some respite. And that's what we can hope for him at that point.
I'm going to try that out and keep you posted on what happens.
I would love to know. I would love to know. And, really hoping that he finds some relief.
I know you told me you have a hard stop. What time is your hard stop? We have
another, what time is it there?
It's
Because I am in a
9:20
different
p.m.
time zone.
Right. It's 9:20 p.m.
So yeah, we'll probably open up for questions because we'll be ending in the 10 minutes.
So if there's anybody that has questions, I think we'll take maybe 1 or 2 questions. And if not, then we can of course wrap it up, because
or if you want to just share your experience of gratitude,
as
you've used gratitude as a as your attitude in a difficult situation. If anybody wants to share anything,
yes, I've opened up the mic, so in case anybody wants to go ahead and unmute and share your experience, so ask a question, go for it, and if not, we can wrap it up. That's
perfect. Thank you.
It is unmuted. Hey, Farhan is here. Wow, good to see you. I didn't see you. Okay, nice to see you. Farhana, me and Farhana go way back, 1996, 95, 96. Did I shock you or something? You dropped the whole phone. Yeah. If you remember Anil Nanavati, we used to work in the same company. I think, spoken to him once. Good to see you. Have you come to this program before? No, this is the first time. You want to share something that you're grateful for, like coming for this program?
I think the topic interested me, but I was late, so I've missed most of the session.
Yeah. Don't worry, it's recorded. I'll send it to the YouTube.
But I hear this all the time, people around me saying, just be grateful for what you have rather than, looking out for what you don't.
Right. By the way, very interestingly, Farhana was in the 9/11.
Yeah.
You were running from the damn building, right?
Yeah.
I remember that. Oh yeah. Wow.
Gratitude that I could run.
Yeah. Oh man, that was awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for sharing that, because that was definitely one of the most critical events of survival. I would say that, so many people lost their lives in. And again, it could have been something that could have left a traumatic trace for you, and it may have, or may have left for others. But then again, and there is, of course, so much work that we do is done in PTSD, so many techniques, but understanding how gratitude can reframe our perception of the event, right? And change the way we relate to it as well. So that's something that gratitude is really, really useful for. Yeah. All right, I think we are doing good. So there aren't any questions or sharing. So we would be very happy for you to enjoy the links that we will be sharing in due course of time, and keep increasing your GQ.
Yes, Manoj, you wanted to say something? Yeah.
Yeah, I want to express my gratitude to for making aware and learn the real power of the gratitude. Thank you, Nupurji. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. My pleasure.
All right. That's it for us now. And we'll see you in the next conscious conversation with Dr. Nupur Agarwal. Bye.
Bye, everybody. Thank you so much for being here.